Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto anime review. This one's going to be for episode 78, which is called Everyone's Motives, and this episode was a pretty big improvement over I think at least the last 2, 3, 4 maybe even, in terms of like, I think we finally got into the kind of core of, I suppose, where we're actually heading, what the nature of like the final confrontation, what's actually going on here is about. And I think we roughly got it mentioned last week that the land of Earth was kind of involved here, so we sort of knew that there were shinobi from the village hidden in the stone, but then confirming it here, and I suppose addressing the fact that now pretty much everyone is aware of this fact. And you had the notable scene of Naruto calling Kuratsuchi to ask if the Leaf could send their trackers in there to investigate. And I think this is an interesting point in that it obviously represented, I suppose, negotiation in a time of peace, in that despite Kuratsuchi not agreeing to exactly what Naruto initially wanted, it was still a very kind of pleasant conversation, and they both had, got what they more or less wanted out of it, in that, Kuratsuchi, of course, isn't just going to be like, okay, we agree, it's definitely our ninjas, we did something wrong, we'll just let you in. As a leader, she couldn't really do that, even though it is a time of peace, even though it's Naruto asking. She can't just, open up the village to Leaf Shinobi like that. That would be a very kind of, I suppose, weak move as a leader. But because it is a time of peace, she's kind of like, okay, again, he is involved here. We'll make sure to kind of apprehend everyone and just kind of take them in and just kind of sort it out that way. Oh, and also Boruto and Sarada are coming. Okay, we'll bring them in too until we can safely send them back to you. It was all a very reasonable kind of discussion. There was a slight hint of tenseness, of course, that I think some of the novels, I think, have also addressed, that there are some sort of rising tensions between some of the nations over some of these types of things. But that's just the nature of what's going on here. There's always going to be some remnants of the kind of older age kind of left over. We saw that in one of the previous arcs, of course, with the land of water, and those people who wanted the time of war basically back. And here we're seeing, I suppose, the legacy of some of the more kind of villainous side of the kind of village hidden in the stone, in that we obviously get revealed the Lord Ku, who seems to be the main villain in all of this. I think the implication is that he is potentially the one using the kind of detonating clay jutsu, which they reveal here is forbidden. We always knew that it was a kind of a unique ability that Deidara had, but now we get that it at least has potentially since then been forbidden. But that's what's going on here. That's what led to Yurito's he's actually still alive. I think that was a really kind of shocking moment in the episode where they cut to that, and it's like, we saved his life, but the implication is that he's horribly injured here, but that he's still alive. So that was pretty crazy to see that. I just expected them to have killed him off, but to keep him alive, I suppose, is somewhat interesting. Wonder will they do anything with him? But I suppose that's one of the issues there, in that a stone ninja has actually very badly injured a leaf ninja, so there is an issue here. But of course, I suppose the idea is that these are sort of rogue shinobi in a way from almost both nations, in that Mitsuki is kind of causing problems because he kind of left and is potentially a traitor, and then on the stone side of things you have this whole group that is related to a forbidden jutsu. Lord Ku, most of the speculation I've seen about him seems to be that people are thinking that he is the grandson that Onoki mentions in what was effectively the first episode of this arc. I think that's one of those things where we've had a very slow section just before this episode, that we almost forget that this arc actually started with that Onoki episode, which looked set to be a sort of one-off episode, but ended up actually kicking off this arc. And he does mention his grandson and something happening there, so it would make sense to tie all of that in with the fact that here is the previous kind of leader of the Stone Village here we're dealing with the current leader of the Stone Village, Kurasuchi, and then here's all this other stuff that relates to that as well. And I suppose in the end of all of this, Kurasuchi's being cautious, trying to be a good leader, but she's going to have to accept the fact that, this is, a lot of this was caused by the, Stone Village kind of, the legacy, of its past. So, I just thought that the episode overall was a lot more interesting. They got a lot more information across than previously. Even little moments like cutting back to the Leaf Village and having Konohamaru and Mirai talk was really interesting, because they're sort of setting up that like Konohamaru is going to like do something here. He's sort of lost in thought over the fact that he's just recently found out that Orochimaru's son is Mitsuki, and I like that when it really came down to it, when asked, Konohamaru was like, no, I care about Mitsuki as a member of my team in the same way that I care about Boruto and Sarada. I don't, paint him with the same brush just because he's related to Orochimaru. He's a different person, and all the time I've known him, I haven't felt like he's basically Orochimaru or anything like that. I thought that was very interesting. It was also interesting that Mirai obviously wasn't born at the time of Saratobi's death, but still obviously has that sort of like, here's something related to someone who killed someone in my family. I found about it later, but like she's trying to maybe, just, I suppose, through Konohamaru explore how she should feel. So I like that, just addressing the relation of those two characters, and especially just getting Konohamaru's thoughts on it. We also, I think, for the first time got to see the death of Saratobi, some of the Saratobi Orochimaru fight in, like, I suppose HD, like full screen basically for the first time, because it's one of those ones where, like, I can't really remember if they cut back to it. Like, obviously they resurrected him again, but I don't specifically remember them doing that many flashbacks to it. Maybe they did and I'm just forgetting, but it felt like it was kind of new animation potentially, but still it was interesting to see that actually just flash back to it, show the emotion, and get across the idea that, like, presently we have a sort of situation with Orochimaru where I think we as the audience are sort of like accepting of him because we know he kind of hasn't really done anything bad all that recently, but there's obviously the potential. But addressing the fact that for a lot of people, his attack on the Leaf Village will be like the only thing that they see of him. So I like that they at least brought up all of that stuff. I thought that was very interesting. We did get a little bit more insight into what's going on with Mitsuki and the other two guys he's with. The main thing would be finding out that those two aren't actually humans. They are also sort of artificial humans in some way. One of them, the one who's more kind of friendly to Mitsuki, seems to say that that they won't live that long, and they're hoping to basically, through taking Mitsuki, discover a way to, I suppose, turn their, I suppose, short lives into a normal lifespan like an actual human. That's super interesting to me because they're obviously addressing the clay jutsu thing and the fact that Deidara could basically make, kind of creatures in a way out of the clay that seem to have some level of kind of being alive to them. And like, are they trying to say that like the Arakas are like failed experiments at making a sort of a normal human out of this clay, and then the other two shinobi, that the one who goes off with Mitsuki at the end and the one that's left to fight Boruto, that those two are also made out of that clay, but they're like successful. So that's going to be a pretty cool, I suppose, science type thing that we're going to get into. I assume it'll be some slightly new take on Deidara's ability of science incorporated with that, with the fact that he's a powerful shinobi who's potentially related to Onoki. That could really add to things and make it actually really interesting when we get into it, because that, I suppose, helps us to understand what's going on with Mitsuki here, and that, like, we know he hasn't directly left for like all that specific reasons just yet, but we know he hasn't really done this with the intent of betraying anyone. There seems to be a sense of him investigating what's going on here, figuring out, I suppose, who he is, what he is, and now that he's kind of discovered that these people also are just like him, they are these artificial beings who kind of want to make something more of themselves. you can understand the connection there between them and why he would kind of go with them. We're just, I suppose, waiting to see the full extent of where exactly they're going with it, and that's going to involve getting into Lord Ku and who he is, because like I assume there's a lot of this arc still left to go, because even though there's those two guys, there's also the other two, the girl and like the taller guy who's also part of that group, so there's still a lot of other fights to come. They're really setting up the fact that I think Konohamaru and potentially even Mirai now are going to also get involved in this fight, and I get the feeling that if there is going to be a bit of an issue between the stone and the leaf, it probably will be based on the fact that both sides have sort of in a way almost like lost. They kind of lose the ability to like keep control of some of their shinobi, and they end up just kind of like crossing over and causing a bit of an issue. In that I can see Konohamaru getting involved in things when we get into it, potentially Mirai going. Of course, Boruto, Shikadai, and Sarada are going. There's going to be a lot of issues in the aftermath of this, but I think they will ultimately all get resolved with the fact of just the stone is going to have to take responsibility for this, because it's sort of their kind of darker legacy, and whatever way they go with the truth about what exactly Mitsuki's trying to do here, I assume it'll be a lot more reasonable and understanding, and they can just basically both go to each other like, look, we both sort of lost control of that situation, everything's fine now, we're okay, but there still be maybe a little bit of tension between both sides. I don't really think they're trying to suggest that the series is maybe going in that direction where the different nations are suddenly going to go to war with each other again. I think the history of the original Naruto show and what happened is kind of always going to be this thing where like, we can't go back to that. We can't go back to the cycle of hatred. We can deal with the like remaining kind of remnants of that kind of feeling. But if we were ever to go to war with each other again, it would just cause chaos. And we already had peace. Our children have grown up in a time of peace. Do we want them going to war like we did? And I think ultimately like cooler heads are going to prevail in all of this, and that won't happen. But that's obviously where we're setting up the whole stuff that's going on in the like manga right now, plus the whole Kawaki thing that's eventually like going to happen, and like we know where that's ultimately heading. But I enjoyed this episode. I'm happy that next episode looks like it's going to be the reunion between Boruto and Mitsuki. And initially, like basically almost before this episode, I was kind of feeling like the second Boruto and Mitsuki meet, the arc will basically be over. But I get the feeling there's still a couple more episodes left. They could really extend this if they needed to, because it looks like there's a lot of fights that are going to happen, and potentially not quite as many people involved as we expect. In that, I expect Onoki will come back into things. I could see Kuretsuchi getting involved in things, because she had a, like, I can't remember exactly, but there was some sense of like she knew Deidara, and there was some sense of like almost like betrayal based on the fact that like he had become part of the Akatsuki. I remember that was specifically kind of part of the war, where there was a bit more of an emotional discussion between her and Deidara when they like captured him when he was kind of resurrected. So given that there's some allusion to that, Onoki's involved here. Potentially Onoki's grandson is who Ku is. Kuretsuchi's probably going to have to play a role here. Konohamaru might play a role in things. Like, there's going to be a lot of stuff that happens. It's just it's going to be interesting to see how much they extend it out, basically. But yeah, that's my thoughts on this week's episode. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were in the episode. But yeah, that's been my my review for the episode. Video coming out either later on today or tomorrow, covering the new chapter of the Boruto manga. So you'll see that very shortly after this video. But yeah, that's been a video. Thanks for watching, and bye.